It was past midnight when the classified document appeared on my Harvard desk. No signature, no official seal, just a single note attached. Professor, you need to see this before tomorrow's briefing. I've analyzed power structures from the Kremlin to Beijing for 30 years, advised 3 administrations on national security, and written extensively about great power competition. But what I discovered in that unmarked folder that autumn night changed everything I thought I knew about who really controls the world's money. The pages revealed a web of financial relationships so intricate, so deliberately obscured, that it took me weeks to understand its full implications. Every major nation drowns in debt. $38 trillion for America alone, $18 trillion for China, over $111 trillion globally. The question that haunts every serious economist sounds deceptively simple. If everyone's borrowing, who exactly is lending? I thought I knew the answer. China holds American bonds, Japan funds European debt, oil-rich nations invest in Western treasuries, the usual suspects of international finance. But the document on my desk revealed something far more sinister and sophisticated than anything I'd encountered in decades of studying global power dynamics. The answer isn't what you think. Once you understand who's really orchestrating this $111 trillion debt system, you'll realize we're not witnessing random economic evolution. We're observing the most successful wealth concentration mechanism in human history, operating in plain sight while disguised as normal market function. Let me walk you through what I found, step by careful step, because the implications reach far beyond any government's budget or central bank's policy. This system affects every pension contribution, every savings deposit, every retirement calculation on the planet. Every worker unknowingly participates in a cycle that enriches those who designed it while impoverishing those who sustain it. By the end of this analysis, you'll understand why this arrangement can't continue indefinitely, and why its eventual collapse should terrify anyone who values economic independence or democratic governance. Because what we've built isn't just unsustainable. It's designed to concentrate power in ways that would make medieval aristocrats envious. The Pentagon briefing document started with American debt statistics that every financial journalist knows by heart. $38 trillion, larger than the entire economy, growing by trillions annually. What shocked me wasn't the size. I've been warning about fiscal irresponsibility for years, but the ownership structure hidden beneath those headline numbers. Most Americans assume China owns most of their government's debt. Wrong. America's biggest creditor is America itself, through a labyrinthine system that would confuse even seasoned financial analysts. The Federal Reserve owns $6.7 trillion of Treasury bonds. But the Fed isn't really separate from government. It's the government's monetary arm, created by Congress, governed by presidential appointees, operating under legislative mandate. So the government owes money to its own bank, money that this bank created from nothing, money that didn't exist until the bank decided to create it by adjusting numbers in computer systems. This isn't borrowing in any traditional sense. It's accounting fiction designed to obscure what's really happening. Another $7 trillion exists in what bureaucrats euphemistically call intragovernmental holdings. Social Security Trust Fund alone, $2.8 trillion. Military Retirement Fund, $1.6 trillion. Medicare reserves, hundreds of billions more. The government literally borrows from Social Security to fund current operations, then promises to pay itself back later from future tax revenues. It's the equivalent of borrowing money from your left pocket to pay your right pocket, then claiming you'll reimburse yourself next week using money you don't yet have. Financial sleight of hand on a scale that would make carnival magicians weep with admiration. But the Pentagon document revealed something that genuinely disturbed me as I sat there at 2 a.m., cross-referencing databases and tracking money flows across institutions. The real lenders aren't shadowy foreign powers or mysterious financial institutions. They're ordinary American citizens unknowingly funding their own systematic impoverishment through the very pension systems designed to secure their retirement. American pension funds hold $3.7 trillion of government debt. State and local governments, another $1.7 trillion. Banks, insurance companies, mutual funds managed for ordinary investors. Together, private American citizens own roughly $24 trillion of their government's $38 trillion debt burden. Nearly two-thirds of all government borrowing is funded by Americans themselves. Here's where the system's diabolic brilliance became clear to me. I started mapping individual money flows, following specific dollars from paychecks through pension systems into Treasury auctions. Take Sarah, a middle school teacher in Ohio. She earns $45,000 annually. Every month, $300 of her salary disappears into her state pension fund, managed by investment professionals she's never met, following strategies she doesn't understand. Where does that $300 go? Into Treasury bonds, because they're government guaranteed and therefore safe. Sarah worries constantly about the national debt she sees on news programs. She votes for politicians who promise fiscal responsibility. She argues with relatives about government spending at family dinners. But Sarah is the creditor she's complaining about. Her retirement security depends entirely on the government continuing to borrow massive amounts and paying interest on those bonds. If America suddenly eliminated its debt tomorrow, her pension fund would lose its safest, most reliable investment vehicle. Returns would plummet. Her retirement would vanish. Sarah becomes both borrower and lender simultaneously, trapped in a financial contradiction she can't escape. As a taxpayer, she'll pay interest on government debt for decades. As a pension beneficiary, she'll receive that same interest as retirement income. The money flows in a perfect circle, minus fees extracted by financial institutions that manage the process. The international dimension revealed patterns that genuinely alarmed me as someone who's spent decades studying great power competition and strategic dependencies. The briefing document contained classified trade flow analyses that suddenly made me understand why our foreign policy has seemed so schizophrenic in recent years. We're not just allied with these countries, we're economically hostage to them in ways most Americans can't imagine. Japan holds $1.1 trillion of American debt. China owns $760 billion, though that figure fluctuates based on political tensions and trade negotiations I've witnessed firsthand in security briefings. But these aren't charity arrangements or traditional lending relationships. They're the result of economic traps that ensnare everyone involved. When Americans purchase Japanese automobiles or Chinese manufactured goods, those exporting countries accumulate vast quantities of dollars, not hundreds of millions, hundreds of billions annually. These dollars create an immediate problem for countries like Japan and China. If Toyota and Sony tried converting their dollar earnings to yen simultaneously, the massive currency exchange would strengthen the yen dramatically, making Japanese exports uncompetitive overnight. The same dynamic applies to China, but with additional strategic complications I've observed during quiet diplomatic communications. China deliberately maintained artificially low currency values for decades to boost exports and employment. This required absorbing enormous dollar inflows that had to be invested somewhere. The U.S. Treasury market represents one of the few financial venues deep enough and liquid enough to absorb hundreds of billions without destabilizing. But here's what the classified analysis revealed that troubled me most. These arrangements aren't voluntary economic partnerships. They're forms of financial bondage disguised as mutually beneficial trade relationships. America consumes physical goods, cars, electronics, clothing, machinery. Other countries provide those goods in exchange for American financial assets, primarily government bonds that represent promises of future payment. The money flows in a perfect circle that resembles nothing so much as a sophisticated protection racket. America maintains the world's reserve currency and largest financial markets. Other countries must participate in this system to access global trade networks. They accept American currency knowing they'll have to reinvest it in American assets, effectively lending their own production back to the country consuming it. But the mechanism sustaining this entire global system revealed the most shocking truth. Central banks don't find money to lend to governments. They literally create it from nothing. Quantitative easing sounds technical, but the process is breathtakingly simple. The Federal Reserve, Bank of England, European Central Bank, they type numbers into computer systems. Money that didn't exist before suddenly exists. No printing presses required. No gold reserves consulted. Just digital entries that instantly become real money. During the 2008 financial crisis, the Federal Reserve created approximately $3.5 trillion through these methods. During COVID, another $4 trillion appeared from nowhere. The institution lending to governments isn't constrained by existing wealth. It manufactures money at will, deciding winners and losers across the entire global economy. This newly created money doesn't distribute evenly through society. It flows through specific channels that systematically enrich certain groups while impoverishing others. The money goes first to banks and financial institutions, which then purchase stocks, bonds, and real estate, inflating prices across all financial markets. The wealthy become exponentially wealthier as asset prices rise. The Bank of England proved that quantitative easing boosted asset prices by 20%. The richest 5% of households became approximately $128,000 wealthier on average just from COVID policies. Meanwhile, working families who owned little beyond their homes saw minimal benefit. We create money to save the economy, but it systematically enriches those who need help least, while imposing costs on those who need help most through inflation and taxation. The human cost grows every year. America paid $1 trillion in interest payments during fiscal 2025, more than the entire defense budget. That number tripled in just 3 years. By 2035, interest payments will consume $1.8 trillion annually. Every dollar paid in interest represents wealth transferred from taxpayers to bondholders, who are increasingly concentrated among the wealthy. Working families pay taxes that fund interest payments to financial institutions managing money for people wealthy enough to own significant financial assets. Developing nations face even crueler mathematics. Poor countries paid $96 billion servicing external debt in 2023. Some allocate 38% of export earnings just to interest payments. Money that could modernize economies instead flows to creditors in wealthy nations. 61 developing nations now spend more than 10% of government revenues on interest alone. These countries become trapped in debt cycles that prevent development while enriching international financial institutions. Their populations grow desperate as governments cannot invest in improvements because resources flow to creditors abroad. The political instability this creates eventually impacts American security through refugee crises and regional conflicts. The security briefing contained crisis scenarios that haunted me for weeks. This system remains stable only while confidence persists. Throughout history, debt crises emerge when lenders suddenly lose faith. Greece in 2010. Latin America in the 1980s, Asia in 1997. The pattern repeats: gradual debt accumulation, apparent stability, sudden confidence collapse, economic devastation. Could this happen to major economies? Conventional wisdom says no. America, China, Japan control their currencies and can print money to meet obligations. But conventional wisdom said housing prices couldn't fall nationwide in 2007. It said the euro was unbreakable in 2010. It never predicted a pandemic could shut down the global economy for 2 years. The risks accumulate daily. Global debt reaches levels never seen during peacetime. After years near zero, interest rates rose sharply, making debt service more expensive. Political polarization makes coherent fiscal policy nearly impossible. Climate change will require massive investments amid already historic debt levels. Aging populations mean fewer workers supporting more retirees. Most dangerous of all, the system depends entirely on confidence. Confidence that governments will make payments, confidence that currencies will hold value, confidence that inflation will remain moderate. When that confidence breaks, and eventually it will, the system breaks with it. So who really owns every government's debt? We do, all of us. Through pension contributions automatically deducted from paychecks, through bank deposits that fund bond purchases, through insurance premiums invested in Treasury securities, through Social Security taxes that flow into government bonds, we collectively lend to ourselves while surrendering control to financial institutions that extract enormous fees for managing a process that makes us both creditors and debtors simultaneously. We have become both the predators and the prey in a system designed to extract our wealth while convincing us we're the beneficiaries. This arrangement has enabled remarkable prosperity, but it has also created unprecedented vulnerability as debt levels climb beyond any reasonable relationship to productive capacity. We've constructed a global economy where everyone owes everyone else, where money is manufactured by central banks, where today's spending is paid by future generations, where policies meant to help everyone benefit those who need help least. This isn't sustainable forever. Mathematics eventually defeats politics. The only questions are what will trigger the correction, when it will arrive, and whether we'll manage the transition intelligently or allow it to manage us through crisis and suffering. The uncomfortable truth is that nobody really controls this system. It operates according to its own logic and momentum, growing beyond the understanding of those who created it. We've built something complex and fragile that now controls us rather than being controlled by us. The classified document that initiated this investigation disappeared from my office the next morning, but the truth it revealed remains. We've created a financial system that systematically enriches the few while indebting the many, all disguised as natural market processes. When ordinary citizens ask who's really lending when everyone's borrowing, they're asking the most important economic question of our time. The answer forces us to confront a system that has made us all complicit in our own exploitation. That midnight briefing taught me something I'll never forget. In the great debt mystery that defines modern civilization, we're not searching for hidden lenders. We're looking in the mirror and discovering that we've become both the architects and victims of a system designed to concentrate wealth while distributing risk. The greatest trick this system ever pulled was convincing us that we're the beneficiaries when we're actually the product being sold.